Blue blood sprayed as Billy Sullivan's skull smashed into the Cassian's snout with a sickening crunch. This was why humans never lost. Even against taller, stronger, toothier aliens, they always fought harder and dirtier. The two warriors traded blows amidst the rubble of a pulverized human settlement, surrounded by the charred bones of colonists and the twisted metal of prefab shelters. Sergeant Sullivan, a grizzled space marine, sank his fist into the feline alien's gut, even as razor claws plunged into his own side, ripping a scream from Billy's throat. "Your kind will pay for invading Proxima B," Billy spat through gritted teeth, hot blood running down his ribs. "This world is ours." "This world belongs to the Cassian Empire now, monkey," Taurus snarled back, his carnivore teeth flashing. "Once we seize its mineral wealth, your pathetic species will fall." They crashed together again, a tangle of rippling muscle, tearing claws and hammering fists. The human drove his knee into the Cassian's groin, then grabbed the felinoid's head and bashed it once, twice, 3 times against a shattered slab of ferrocrete. But Taurus twisted, jaws snapping shut on Billy's forearm, piercing skin and crushing bone. Billy howled in agony as the alien gnawed his arm like a dog worrying a rat. Before he could try to gouge Taurus's eyes, a sudden thunderclap hurled them apart. The shockwave from a Cassian orbital strike ripped through the ruins, pelting both with bits of rubble. Ears ringing, Billy staggered upright, left arm going numb. 10 paces away, Taurus rose too, fur matted with blood, man and alien glaring at each other with naked malice. Then the Cassian snatched up a plasma rifle and opened fire. Billy barely dove behind an overturned ground car before blinding blue bolts screeched past. His breath came hard and fast. The human forces were outnumbered 10 to 1. If the Cassians took this colony, their warships could strike even deeper into human space. He had to find a way to beat Taurus and alert the human fleet, or billions would die under the cat's claws. The fate of mankind rested on him not losing this fight. Plasma bolts sizzled over Billy's head, blasting smoldering craters in the rubble. He was pinned down with Taurus raining fire on his position. Billy's eyes darted left and right, searching for a weapon, for anything to fight back with. There! On a fallen marine's belt, a frag grenade. Billy lunged, plasma scorching past his ear. His fingers closed around the grenade. He snatched it up, primed it, and hurled it at Taurus in one smooth motion. The Cassian saw it coming. Taurus leaped aside with feline agility, and the grenade detonated harmlessly in a spray of dirt and debris. Taurus advanced, still firing, plasma bolts stitching a line of molten holes in the ground, straight toward Billy. Billy grabbed a jagged metal rod, part of a blasted building frame. Taurus was almost on top of him. The alien raised his rifle to fire point blank. Billy swung the rod with all his strength. It smashed the gun from Taurus's hands, sending it clattering away. Taurus snarled and pounced. Billy met the alien's charge, rod clashing against claws. They fought like wild animals, Taurus ripping and tearing, Billy smashing the rod into the Cassian's body again and again. Ribs cracked under the rod's blows, claws carved bloody gashes down Billy's face. The roar of engines split the air. A human dropship swooped low overhead. Marines fast roped down, opening fire on Taurus. The Cassian disengaged, sprinting to cover. He scooped up his fallen plasma rifle on the way. The Marines poured on suppressing fire, forcing Taurus to retreat. Billy staggered toward the squad leader, blood running into his eyes, hand clamped over the flank where Taurus had nearly gutted him. "Sergeant Sullivan, sir." The Marine snapped a salute despite the mayhem. "New orders from HQ. We're pulling back to the spaceport for evacuation. The Cassians are overrunning our positions everywhere." Billy glanced around at the burning ruins, jaw clenched. He gave a tight nod. "All right, Corporal. Let's get our people out of this hellhole." He held out a hand, slick with blood. "And somebody get me a damn rifle. I've got a score to settle with that Cassian bastard." Keep moving," Billy shouted, pushing people towards the shuttles. "Women and children first, wounded to the front." Just then a thunderous boom shook the spaceport. A massive fireball erupted from the far side of the landing pad, hurling twisted metal and burning bodies through the air. Billy was slammed to the ground, his ears ringing, his vision blurred. He shook his head, trying to clear it, and staggered to his feet. Through the smoke and flames, he saw a figure stalking towards him. It was Taurus, his fur matted with blood, his eyes glinting with malice. Behind him marched a phalanx of Caitian shock troopers, their plasma rifles leveled. Without warning, the Caitians opened fire, spraying the crowd with searing blue bolts. Civilians and Marines alike were cut down, their screams lost in the roar of weapons fire. Billy's blood boiled with rage. He snatched up his rifle and charged towards the Caitians, bellowing a war cry. His Marines rallied behind him, and together they plunged into the fray. Plasma bolts and bullets crisscrossed the spaceport as the two forces clashed. Billy ducked and weaved through the chaos, his rifle bucking in his hands as he fired burst after burst at the Caitian troopers. He saw Taurus up ahead, saw the alien raising his rifle to take aim. Billy didn't hesitate. He snatched a grenade from his belt, primed it, and hurled it at Taurus's feet. The Caitian tried to leap away, but he was too slow. The grenade detonated in a flash of fire and shrapnel, hurling Taurus backwards. Billy seized his chance. He lunged forward and tackled Taurus, sending both of them crashing to the ground. Taurus's rifle skittered away across the ferrocrete. The two warriors grappled fiercely, rolling over and over. Billy managed to pin the Caitian beneath him. He drew back his fist and slammed it into Taurus's face, feeling the alien's snout crunch under his knuckles. Again and again he struck, putting all his hatred, all his fury behind each blow. But Taurus wasn't finished. With a snarl he raked his claws across Billy's chest, shredding through his armor like paper. Hot blood spilled down Billy's front as searing pain lanced through him. Taurus kicked him away, and Billy fell back, gasping. Both fighters climbed unsteadily to their feet, squaring off like prize fighters. Billy's vision was starting to grey at the edges from blood loss, but he raised his fists, ready to go another round. Suddenly a dropship swooped low overhead, its engines roaring. Billy hesitated, his gaze flicking from the dropship to Taurus. Every fibre of his being wanted to finish this, to put Taurus down once and for all. But the Caitians were pressing in from all sides now. He had to get his people out. Then he turned and sprinted for the dropship, leaping aboard just as it lifted off. The hatch sealed behind him, and he collapsed against it, his chest heaving, his wounds screaming. As the dropship clawed for the sky, Billy dragged himself to a viewport. He looked down at the burning ruin of the spaceport, at the Caitian warships raining destruction on the colony, and he saw Taurus, a tiny figure far below, staring up at him with pure, seething hatred. The battle for Proxima B was lost, but the war was just beginning. The human dropship shuddered as it docked with the UES Indomitable, the massive United Earth Alliance carrier that hung in high orbit over Proxima B. Billy limped down the ramp, clutching his still bleeding wounds, his face a mask of pain and exhaustion. Admiral Hawkins strode forward to meet him, his weathered face etched with concern. "Sergeant Sullivan, I've read your report," he said grimly. "The loss of Proxima Centauri B is a heavy blow, but we can't dwell on it. The Caitians are pushing deeper into our space, and we need every able-bodied soldier to hold the line." Billy straightened, ignoring the screaming agony in his torn flesh. "What are my orders, sir?" Hawkins waved a hand, and a holographic star map sprang to life, a small rust-colored planet pulsing red at its center. "This is Zelos Prime," he said. "It's a key strategic location, with rich veins of ununpentium, the crucial element for our Nova missiles. The Caitians are staging an assault on the planet as we speak. Your orders are to lead a strike team to the surface, link up with the local garrison, and defend the ununpentium mines at all costs. If the Caitians capture those mines, they'll have the raw materials to build their own Nova missiles, and then God help us all." Billy snapped a crisp salute, his blood-caked hand trembling only slightly. "Understood, sir. We'll hold Zelos Prime or die trying." Hours later, Billy's drop pod slammed into the surface of Zelos Prime, the impact rattling his bones. The pod's hatch blew open, and he stumbled out into a scene of utter chaos. Human and Caitian forces were locked in brutal trench warfare across the planet's rocky crimson surface. Plasma bolts and tracer rounds crisscrossed the battlefield, the air thick with the stench of ozone and blood. Billy rallied his strike team with a barked command, and they pushed forward, vaulting over the lip of a trench and charging toward the distant ontent mines. Cation soldiers swarmed to meet them, feline faces contorted in snarls beneath their helmets. Suddenly a familiar roar split the air, rising above the din of battle. Billy spun to see Taurus charging toward him, a massive Cation battle-axe clutched in his claws, his eyes blazing with hatred. "You!" Billy snarled, raising his rifle. But Taurus was too fast. The Cation warrior leaped forward, swinging his axe in a murderous arc. Billy barely managed to roll aside, the axe's blade cleaving the air where his head had been a split second before. Billy came up firing, his bullets sparking off Taurus's armor as the Cation closed in. The two warriors slammed together, Billy's rifle wedged between them, Taurus's fetid breath hot on his face. They grappled fiercely, a tangle of straining muscle and snapping teeth, as the battle raged around them. With a roar of effort, Taurus wrenched the rifle from Billy's hands and tossed it away. The axe swung again, and Billy ducked desperately, feeling the wind of its passage. He snatched his combat knife from his belt and lunged forward, plunging it toward Taurus's throat. But the Cation twisted aside with feline grace, and the knife scored a glancing blow across his armored shoulder. Taurus's clawed hand shot out, seizing Billy by the throat and lifting him bodily off the ground. "I will tear the heart from your chest, human," Taurus snarled, his grip tightening. Billy choked, black spots swimming in his vision, his legs kicking weakly. His hand scrabbled at his belt, fingers closing around the grip of his sidearm. He ripped the pistol free and jammed it under Taurus's chin, pulling the trigger with his last ounce of strength. The shot echoed like thunder, and Taurus's head snapped back, his grip loosening. Billy fell to the ground, gasping for breath, as the Cation staggered away, dark blood seeping from beneath his helmet. Billy climbed unsteadily to his feet, pistol trained on Taurus. The Cation glared at him, hate smoldering in his eyes, then turned and vanished into the chaos of the battle, leaving a trail of blood in his wake. Billy sucked in a ragged breath, then rallied his strike team with a wave of his hand. They had to reach those mines. The fate of humanity depended on it. With a final glance at Taurus's retreating form, Billy plunged back into the fray, the sounds of war engulfing him once more. With a scrape of metal on metal, Billy wrenched his combat knife from his boot and slashed at Taurus's face. The Cation jerked his head back, Billy's blade missing by a hair's breadth. Taurus snarled, baring his fangs, then lunged, swinging the massive battle-axe. Billy rolled aside as the axe cleaved the air, the whoosh of its passage ruffling his sweat-soaked hair. The ground shuddered beneath them, nearly throwing Billy off balance. He risked a glance past Taurus, and his blood ran cold. A colossal Cation mining drill burst from the earth in a geyser of rock and dust, grinding towards the ontent mines. "No!" The shout tore from Billy's throat. The Cation's plan snapped into focus. If they couldn't capture the mines, they'd destroy them, denying the vital Nova missile fuel to both sides. Billy feinted left, then dove right, rolling under Taurus's next axe swing. He came up sprinting, pumping his legs, racing the drill. Plasma bolts sizzled past him as he hurdled trenches and blasted rubble. His hand flew to his belt, snatching a demo charge. Arms pumping, he primed the explosive, thumb hovering over the detonator. He had to blow the drill before it reached the mines. A roar from behind. Billy started to turn, too late. Taurus crashed into him, a freight train of fur and fury. The demo charge flew from Billy's hand as they hit the dirt together, skidding and tumbling. It clattered to the ground near the drill's churning treads, red numbers flashing on its display as it counted down. Taurus ended up on top, a nightmarish vision of bared claws and glistening fangs, amber eyes blazing with rage and triumph. The Cation slashed, claws ripping through Billy's armor, drawing blood. Billy bucked and heaved, throwing all his strength into dislodging the monstrous alien. Taurus raked his claws across Billy's face, blinding pain, the stench of his own seared flesh. With a bellow of desperate rage, Billy drove his knee into Taurus's groin. The Cation's howl turned strangled. His grip loosened, Billy kicked him off and scrambled to his feet. The demo charge lay in the dirt ahead, numbers flashing faster and faster. Beyond it, the drill bore down on the mines, a juggernaut of grinding metal. Billy hurled himself forward, scooping up the demo charge. He spun to face Taurus, who was already back on his feet, battle-axe clenched in his claws, charging like a maddened bull. No time to think. Billy armed the demo charge and hurled it with all his strength. Straight at Taurus. The charge struck the Caitian's armored chest and stuck fast. Taurus's eyes widened. He skidded to a halt, dropping the axe, clawing frantically at the beeping device. The drill teetered on the edge of the massive crater left by the demo charge's detonation. Metal groaned and screeched, servos whined. Then, ponderously, inexorably, the drill toppled, crashing to the earth in a deafening cacophony of rending metal and shattering stone. It lay still, smoking, broken. Billy dragged himself to his feet, his whole body one giant throbbing ache. He looked for Taurus. The blast site was a mess of smoke and debris. No sign of the Caitian. A savage smile split Billy's bloody lips. With any luck, Taurus was nothing but a smear under that wreckage. He staggered around, waving his arms, rallying his strike team. They emerged from foxholes and shell craters, battered but unbroken. As one, the human soldiers surged forward, a tide of determined humanity. Gunfire and plasma fire crisscrossed over their heads. Soldiers fell, screaming, but the rest pushed on. The fate of the human race hung in the balance, and Billy would be damned if he let those mines fall. Billy's team battled through the Caitian lines, plasma bolts sizzling past them, the stench of ozone and scorched flesh choking the air. They pushed forward relentlessly, leapfrogging from cover to cover, returning fire with grim determination. At last they reached the mine entrance, only to find it blocked by a massive cave-in. Rubble and twisted metal sealed the way, an impenetrable barrier. But Billy hadn't come this far to be stopped now. "The emergency tunnel," he barked, recalling the briefing. "On me!" He led them at a sprint around the mine's perimeter, bullets sparking off the rocks at their feet. There, a narrow crevice hidden in the shadows. Billy plunged in, his team close behind. Inside the tunnels were a labyrinth of darkness and echoing stone. They moved cautiously, flashlights probing the gloom, ears straining for any sound of the enemy. Suddenly, plasma fire erupted from a side passage. Caitian troops lying in ambush. Billy's team responded instantly, rifles roaring in the confines of the tunnel. Muzzle flashes strobed, casting grotesque shadows. Screams echoed, human and Caitian alike. It was brutal. Close-quarters fighting. No room for error or mercy. They cleared the tunnel section by bloody section, leaving fallen foes in their wake. Then they were through, emerging into a vast cavern. Lights glared overhead, illuminating a sprawling industrial complex. The refinery. And there, amidst the pipework and catwalks, was Taurus. The Caitian warlord stood tall, shouting orders, as his engineers scurried to plant explosives. Cold rage gripped Billy's heart. He had to stop this. "Fan out!" he roared to his team. "Engage those sappers! I've got Taurus!" And he was moving, sprinting across the cavern floor, straight for his nemesis. Taurus saw him coming. The alien's lips peeled back from his fangs in a snarl. He snatched a plasma staff from a nearby rack and leaped to meet Billy's charge. They clashed in the heart of the refinery, plasma staff hissing against rifle barrels, sparks cascading. Around them the battle raged as human and Caitian forces traded fire across the machinery. Taurus was a whirlwind of deadly motion, his staff humming as it slashed and thrust. Billy parried frantically, the impacts jarring his arms, sending numbing vibrations through his fingers. He gave ground step by step as Taurus pressed the attack. The Caitian's eyes glowed with savage triumph. Billy's back slammed into a railing, nowhere left to retreat. Taurus lunged, stabbing for Billy's heart. Desperately, Billy twisted aside. The plasma staff seared past, cleaving into a control panel in a spray of sparks. Seizing his chance, Billy lashed out with a boot, catching Taurus square in the knee. The joint gave with a sickening crunch, and the Caitian staggered, off balance. Billy surged forward, hammering his rifle stock into Taurus's face with all his strength. The blow shattered the alien's cybernetic eye in a burst of glass and metal. Taurus howled, reeling back, dark blood streaming down his muzzle. A shout rang out across the cavern. Billy's head snapped around. A Caitian engineer crouched by the main reactor column, fists raised in triumph, a detonator blinking in his claws. The explosives were armed. Taurus barked a vicious laugh. He fixed his remaining eye on Billy, a glare of pure, seething hate. "For the glory of the Caitian Empire," he spat. And before Billy could lunge to stop him, Taurus brought his fist down on the detonator's trigger. The world erupted in fire and thunder. Explosions tore through the refinery, ripping apart pipelines, shattering machinery. A massive shockwave hurled Billy from his feet, slamming him to the cavern floor. Alarms shrieked, nearly drowned out by the roar of escaping gases and secondary detonations. The ground heaved and bucked, fissures splitting the rock. Structural beams groaned, then gave way with tortured shrieks of rending metal. Billy struggled to his hands and knees, his head ringing, blood running into his eyes from a gash on his forehead. All around him was chaos and destruction, flames and falling debris. Through the smoke and swirling dust, he glimpsed Taurus staggering away, vanishing into the apocalyptic maelstrom. Billy surged to his feet, fury and desperation lending him strength. The ununpentium, the key to humanity's survival, was lost. The Caitian bastard had to pay. But there was no time. Huge chunks of the ceiling were crashing down, smashing through catwalks and crushing equipment. The whole place was coming apart. He took off at a dead run, zigzagging through the collapsing labyrinth of the refinery. Rubble pounded down around him, each impact shaking the cavern to its foundations. Ahead, through veils of dust and fire, he could see his team scrambling for the exit tunnel. The floor heaved beneath him, nearly pitching him off his feet. He leaped a widening crack, feeling the heat of magma on his face as he cleared it. A massive groaning roar filled the air, drowning out all other sound. Billy risked a glance upward and felt his blood turn to ice in his veins. The cavern roof was splitting apart, huge slabs of rock breaking free and plunging downward. The whole mountain was caving in, millions of tons of stone coming down to bury them all. And he was still 100 meters from the tunnel mouth. Gritting his teeth, Billy lowered his head and charged forward into the teeth of the apocalypse. His lungs burned and his body screamed for rest, but he drove himself on through sheer force of will. A boulder the size of a ground car smashed down barely a meter in front of him, cratering the floor. He hurdled it without breaking stride. There was no dodging the falling rocks, no avoiding the destruction. There was only speed and raw, desperate determination. The tunnel mouth loomed ahead, his team beckoning frantically from its entrance. Massive cracks radiated out across the ceiling above them, the rock groaning as it strained to hold together. 50 meters, 30, 10. With a final lunging stride, Billy hurled himself into the tunnel. And behind him, with a titanic roar that shook the world, the cavern collapsed in on itself. 1,000,000 tons of rock crashing down in an avalanche of destruction. For a moment he lay stunned, gasping for breath, his mind reeling. Then his training kicked in. He forced himself back to his feet, staggering but unbroken. "Move!" he rasped to his team, his voice raw. "Back to the surface, double time!" And they were running again, fleeing the dying groans of the collapsing cavern, racing the rippling shockwaves through the twisting tunnels. They burst from the tunnel mouth into the red-lit chaos of the battlefield above, gulping down the dust-choked air as if it were the purest oxygen. Behind them, the secret entrance vanished, swallowed by an avalanche of rubble and debris that obliterated any sign it had ever existed. The ununpentium was lost. The Caitians had won this round and won it decisively. But as he rallied his battered team, as he barked orders to establish a perimeter and call for extraction, Billy's mind fixed on a single searing thought. Taurus had escaped. The Caitian warlord was still out there somewhere. And this fight was far from over. Rubble rained down, clattering against Billy's helmet, as he sprinted through the crumbling cavern. Time slowed to a crawl, each breath an eternity in his lungs. The world shrank to the pounding of his heart and the bite of dust in his throat. His gaze locked on a fallen Caitian's plasma rifle. He dove, snatching it up, rolling to his knees. The weapon hummed to life in his hands, its weight both alien and familiar. A support pillar, thick as an oak, caught his eye. It was the linchpin, the keystone. Bring it down and the whole cavern would collapse like a house of cards. Billy raised the rifle, aimed at the pillar's base and fired. The plasma bolts sizzled through the air, blue-white and blinding. They slammed into the pillar, eating into the stone, molecular layer by molecular layer. The pillar groaned, then toppled, slow at first. Then all at once it crashed down, an avalanche of rock and dust. And there, directly in its path, was Taurus. The Caitian looked up, his remaining eye wide with shock and disbelief. The pillar smashed into him, driving him to the ground, pinning him like a butterfly to a card. They obeyed, sprinting for the exit tunnel, dodging the chunks of cavern ceiling that plummeted around them. A part of Billy, the part hardened by war and loss, whispered to leave Taurus to his fate, to let the cavern take him, bury him, erase him from the universe. But another part, the part that made him human, that separated him from the beasts and the monsters, knew he couldn't. With a growl of frustration, Billy turned back. He sprinted to Taurus's side and gripped the pillar, straining to lever it off the Caitian. Taurus stared up at him, incredulous. "What are you doing, human?" he snarled. "Leave me!" Billy gritted his teeth, his muscles screaming as he fought against the pillar's immense weight. "No one gets left behind," he ground out. "Not even you." With a Herculean effort, his veins standing out like cords, Billy managed to shift the pillar. Just an inch, just a fraction, but it was enough. Taurus crawled out, staggering to his feet. He stared at Billy, something like wonder in his eye. And then the world fell in. A chunk of cavern ceiling as large as a dropship broke loose directly above them. It plummeted, a doomsday hammer, a falling moon. Billy moved on instinct. He tackled Taurus, hurling them both out of the way. They hit the ground hard, rolling as the massive slab of rock crashed down behind them, an impact that shook the cavern to its foundations. They scrambled to their feet, eyes locked, a moment of understanding passing between them. Then as one they turned and sprinted for the exit tunnel. The cavern collapsed behind them, a roaring maelstrom of destruction. Dust billowed, stone cracked, the very earth screamed. At the last second, they dove through the tunnel entrance. A heartbeat later, the cavern imploded with a deafening boom, sealing itself forever, entombing the Unum Pentium and the ghosts of the fallen. Billy and Taurus tumbled out onto the surface, coughing, choking on the dust-choked air. They lay there for a moment, chests heaving, blood running from a dozen wounds. Slowly, painfully, they dragged themselves upright. They stood facing each other, two warriors, battered and bloodied but unbroken. Taurus opened his mouth as if to speak, as if to say something that might bridge the light years and the oceans of blood between them. But then the scream of engines split the air, the evac shuttles descending like avenging angels, Billy's team rushing to load the wounded, to ferry them to safety. In the chaos, in the swirl of dust and shouting voices, Taurus slipped away. He vanished into the smoke and the rubble, a ghost, a phantom. Billy watched him go, a strange mix of emotions warring in his chest. Relief, yes, and a weary sort of triumph, but also something else, something he couldn't quite name. The battle was over, but the war raged on. Billy stood ramrod straight before Admiral Hawkins in the UEA carrier's briefing room, ignoring the agony of his battered body. The Admiral's face was grave as he paced. "Losing the Unum Pentium mines is a hell of a blow, Sergeant," Hawkins said. "But your actions kept that resource out of Caitian claws. You did good down there." "Thank you, sir," Billy replied, but the words felt hollow. Too many good humans had died on Zelos Prime. Suddenly, alarms blared. Hawkins spun to the comm screen as a harried officer appeared. "Admiral, Caitian forces have launched an all-out assault on New Eden. They're burning the croplands. If we lose those food supplies—" Hawkins' jaw clenched. He turned to Billy, eyes hard. Sergeant, I need your team on the ground now. We can't let those bastards take New Eden. Get down there and hit them with everything you've got. Hours later, Billy crouched in a scorched wheat field on New Eden, plasma rifle in hand, his squad fanned out around him. Smoke stung his eyes and throat. In the distance, Cation tanks rumbled through the once peaceful farmland, crushing crops beneath their treads. "Move out," Billy ordered. "Stick to cover, watch for contacts. Let's send these kittens running home to Mama." They advanced cautiously, darting from shattered farmhouses to burned-out vehicles. Plasma fire sizzled overhead, the Cation forces drawing closer. As they crested a hill, Billy's blood ran cold. Spread across the valley below was a sea of Cation soldiers, a phalanx of death, marching relentlessly towards New Eden's capital. And at their head, Billy saw a figure he knew all too well. "Taurus?" The Casian's armor gleamed darkly, his weapons glinting. He roared a challenge that echoed across the battlefield. Billy roared back, primal and fierce. "Light 'em up!" His squad opened fire, plasma bolts stitching glowing threads through the Cation ranks. The aliens returned fire instantly, the air filling with deadly energy. Billy charged down the hill straight towards Taurus, hosing the Cations with searing plasma. His squad followed, yelling battle cries. The two forces crashed together like waves against a cliff. Plasma scorched, bullets whined, claws and blades flashed. Billy waded through the chaos, rifle blazing, cutting down Cations left and right. And then Taurus was there, looming before him. The warlord's cybernetic eye glowed blood-red, his fanged maw twisted in a snarl. He leveled his massive plasma cannon at Billy. Billy's rifle clicked empty. No time to reload. He hurled it at Taurus's head and dove aside as a plasma bolt sizzled through the space he'd just occupied. Rolling to his feet, Billy drew his combat knife, the blade glinting. Taurus discarded his cannon and extended his claws, each a foot of razor-sharp bone. They circled each other, warriors born. Then Taurus lunged, a lightning strike. Billy parried, feeling the shock in his bones. He slashed back, blade hissing. Slash, stab, dodge, counter. They danced a whirlwind of lethal steel and slashing claws, oblivious to the battle raging around them. Taurus scored a hit, claws raking down Billy's arm, shredding flesh. Billy hissed in pain but pressed his attack. His knife flashed, cutting a gash across Taurus's chest, silvery blood welling. They separated, circling once more, breath coming hard. Billy adjusted his grip on his slick, blood-soaked knife. Suddenly a shadow fell across them. Billy risked a glance up and his gut clenched. A massive Cation dreadnought had entered orbit, eclipsing the sun. Plasma rained from its batteries, hammering the human forces. The UEA carrier swooped in, its own guns thundering. The two mighty ships traded titanic blows, explosions silhouetting them against the sky. On the ground, the battle dissolved into mayhem as orbital bombardment crashed down. Humans and Cations alike scrambled for cover. Billy lost sight of Taurus in the upheaval. Gritting his teeth, he gestured to his squad. "Fall back, get to the evac point." They raced through the smoke and fire, plasma bolts sizzling around them, leaping craters and dodging debris raining from the cataclysmic space battle above. Heart-pounding, Billy led his squad into the shelter of a ravine, following it towards the extraction zone. As they neared the evac site, a flicker of motion caught Billy's eye. He looked up to a solitary figure standing atop a nearby ridge, Taurus. The Cation shouldered a long-barreled plasma rifle, sighting directly at Billy. Breath caught in his throat, Billy froze. The world shrank to him and Taurus, that blood-red cybernetic eye glaring, Taurus's finger tightening on the trigger. Time stretched out, the moment yawning into an eternity as Taurus sighted down his rifle at Billy. The plasma weapon's barrel glowed hellish red, aimed squarely at Billy's heart. Billy tensed, every muscle coiled, ready to hurl himself aside. But he knew, with sinking certainty, that he'd never move fast enough to dodge the shot. Suddenly the sky lit up, as if a second sun had ignited. A searing lance of plasma from the UEA carrier speared the Cation dreadnought, puncturing its armored hull and stabbing deep into its reactor core. For a heartbeat, the dreadnought hung suspended, a dark silhouette against the blinding glare. Then it detonated in a cataclysmic blast, a sphere of incandescent plasma expanding outward, consuming the Cation ship in an inferno of unimaginable heat and light. The shockwave hit a split second later. The ground heaved like a living thing, nearly throwing Billy off his feet. A hurricane wind roared across the battlefield, whipping dust and debris into a blinding maelstrom. On the ridge, Taurus staggered, his shot going wide as the shockwave slammed into him. The plasma bolt sizzled past Billy's head, so close he felt the heat of its passage, smelled the stench of his own singed hair. Billy didn't hesitate. His hand flew to his belt, snatching a plasma grenade. He primed it with a thumb swipe and hurled it with all his strength, straight at Taurus. The grenade detonated at the Cation's feet in a searing flash of blue-white plasma. The blast engulfed Taurus, the heat so intense it melted his armor, fusing it to his fur in a grotesque amalgam of metal and flesh. But somehow impossibly, Taurus didn't fall. With a roar that was equal parts pain and rage, the Cation warlord staggered forward, out of the dissipating fireball. His armor smoked and sizzled, fused to his body. His fur was scorched away in patches, revealing blistered, blackened skin beneath. And his eyes blazed with an intensity that was beyond mere hatred. It was the look of a being consumed by a single, all-encompassing purpose: murder. Taurus began to charge down the hill, straight towards Billy, his strides lengthening into loping bounds faster and faster. A keening battle cry tore from his throat, a sound of pure, primal bloodlust. Billy braced himself, raising his rifle, knowing it was already too late. Taurus was coming, an unstoppable force of claws and fangs and rage, and nothing in the universe could save Billy from his fury. But then a miracle happened. From behind Billy a mighty roar went up, a sound of defiance and courage and indomitable human spirit. He risked a glance back and his heart leaped. Charging up from the rear, a tide of human soldiers surged past Billy on either side, but these were no ordinary soldiers. They wore no uniforms, carried no standard weapons. They were farmers, laborers, shopkeepers, the ordinary citizens of New Eden, armed with whatever weapons they could muster. Plasma rifles looted from fallen Cations, crude spears and clubs fashioned from farming tools, bare fists clenched in white-knuckled grips. The militia of New Eden had risen. They smashed into the Cation lines like a human battering ram, a wave of bodies and blades and desperate courage. The Cations reeled back, their formation shattering under the onslaught. They tried to regroup, to bring their superior weapons to bear, but the militiamen were among them now, fighting with the fury of those whose homes and loved ones were at stake. Taurus disappeared from view, swallowed up by the heaving tide of human bodies. For a moment Billy thought he glimpsed the warlord in the melee, still fighting, still trying to claw his way through the press of bodies to reach his nemesis. But the tide of battle pushed him back, submerging him in the chaos. Billy and his squad surged forward to join the fray, the militiamen parting to let them through. The human forces merged into one, militia and marines, farmers and warriors, united in common cause. Step by bloody step, they drove the Cations back. Plasma fire crisscrossed the battlefield, searing the air. Blades flashed and clashed, screams of pain and fury split the sky. Above them, the UEA carrier pressed its advantage, its mighty guns hammering the remaining Cation ships. One by one, the alien craft succumbed, hulls breached, engines failing. They broke formation, fleeing for the stars, trailing smoke and fire. The invaders were in full retreat now, the battle for New Eden turning into a rout. Cation dropships swooped low over the battlefield, trying to pluck their forces from the jaws of defeat. As one ship thundered overhead, Billy saw a familiar figure leap aboard, half dragged by a pair of Cation soldiers. Taurus, his armor still smoking, his body battered but unbroken. For a split second, the warlord's gaze locked with Billy's. Even at a distance, Billy could feel the heat of it, the unquenchable hatred, the promise of retribution. Then the dropship veered away, engines roaring, carrying Taurus away from the field of his defeat. It dwindled into the sky, vanishing into the clouds of smoke and battle haze. All around Billy, a mighty cheer went up from the human forces. Fists pumped the air, rifles were thrust aloft in triumph. Ragged voices raised in songs of victory, the sound swelling until it seemed to shake the very ground. They had done it. Against all odds, against an enemy that had seemed invincible, they had prevailed. New Eden was safe. Its people could sleep soundly tonight, knowing their world remained their own. But as Billy stood amidst the jubilation, his own wounds throbbing, exhaustion dragging at his limbs, he knew this was only a respite, not a resolution. Taurus was still out there. The war still raged across the stars. This had been a victory, yes, a crucial one. But it was just one battle in a war that would determine the fate of the galaxy. Billy and Taurus, human and Caitian, were destined to meet again, to clash on other battlefields, on other worlds. For now, though, there was this moment. This one shining moment of triumph snatched from the jaws of despair. Billy raised his own fist to the sky, adding his voice to the chorus of victory. For now it was enough, it had to be. As the cheers of victory echoed across New Eden, Billy stood apart from the revelry, his heart heavy. The battle was won, but at what cost? The fields lay trampled, the once peaceful villages reduced to smouldering ruins, and the eyes of the fallen, both human and Caitian, seemed to stare accusingly at him from every shadow. In the midst of the celebration, Admiral Hawkins pulled Billy aside, his face grim. "We've just received intel," he said quietly. "The Caitians are massing a fleet on the edge of our space, larger than anything we've seen before. They're preparing for a final assault, to wipe humanity from the stars once and for all." Billy's fists clenched. After all they'd sacrificed, all they'd lost, could it truly end like this? "What's our move, sir?" Hawkins looked at him steadily. "We strike first. A preemptive assault on the Caitian homeworld itself. If we can cut off the head of the snake, destroy their leadership, maybe we can end this war before it consumes us all." Billy nodded slowly. It was a desperate gambit, but what choice did they have? "My team will lead the ground assault." "It's a one-way trip, son," Hawkins warned. "There may be no coming back from this." As the UEA fleet burned towards the Caitian homeworld, Billy and his squad prepared for the drop. They checked and rechecked their weapons, their armor, each movement precise and ritual. There was a heaviness to the air, a sense of finality. They all knew the odds of survival were slim. Billy's thoughts turned unbidden to Taurus. The Caitian warrior had been a constant spectre in his mind since New Eden. The hatred in those feline eyes, the rage, it haunted Billy. He couldn't shake the feeling that their fates were intertwined, that their final confrontation was inevitable. They hit the ground hard, the impact jarring Billy's teeth. The pod door blasted open, and they emerged into a scene of utter chaos. Human and Caitian ships clashed in the skies above, energy weapons filling the air with screeching death. On the surface, the Caitian capital sprawled before them, all twisting spires and alien architecture. Billy rallied his squad with a gesture, and they plunged into the city, weapons spitting fire. Caitian warriors boiled out to meet them, all claws and fangs and hissing fury. The battle quickly dissolved into a brutal, close-quarters brawl, a nightmare of blood and lasers and shattered stone. They pushed deeper into the city, inch by hard-fought inch. The Caitians fought with the ferocity of cornered beasts, and Billy's squad paid for every foot of ground with blood. Riker fell, his chest a smoking ruin. Chavez was cut down, swarmed by a tide of feline bodies. Billy fought on, numb to the pain, numb to the death. His rifle grew hot in his hands, its power cell drained and discarded and replaced again and again. The streets ran red with mingled human and Caitian blood. At last, they stood before the grand hall of the Caitian Parliament, a massive structure of clawed stone and snarling gargoyles. The doors shuddered under their breaching charges, and then they were inside, storming the heart of the Caitian war machine. And there, in the center of the vaulted chamber, stood Taurus. The Caitian was barely recognizable. His body was a lattice-work of cybernetic enhancements, his flesh more metal than fur. His eyes blazed with the zealot's fire, twin furnaces of hatred. "You should not have come here, human," Taurus snarled, his voice a metallic rasp. This is the end for your kind. They clashed in a storm of fire and fury, Billy's rifle bucking in his hands, Taurus's fusion claws carving the air. The chamber shook with the violence of their battle, dust raining from the ceiling, stone cracking under the onslaught. It was a duel of titans, a contest of wills as much as weapons. They had faced each other so many times on so many worlds that it felt almost like a dance, a deadly choreography written in blood and pain. Taurus was stronger, faster, his body a killing machine of Cation science. But Billy was driven by something more, a desperate, unquenchable human fury. He fought with the strength of a species on the brink, a man with nothing left to lose. And in the end, as the smoke cleared and the echoes faded, it was Billy who stood over Taurus's broken body, the Cation's cybernetic eyes flickering and dying. Around them lay the shattered corpses of the Cation leadership, the command and control of their war effort decapitated in one fell swoop. Billy staggered from the grand hall, his body battered and bleeding, his mind numb. He barely registered the extraction, the frantic flight back to the UEA fleet. He watched from a viewport as the Cation homeworld receded, the fires of war still raging across its surface. They had won. The Cation fleet was in disarray, their leadership destroyed. The war that had consumed the galaxy for so long was finally over. But as Billy looked out over the stars, he felt no joy, no sense of triumph, only a hollow emptiness, a void where his purpose had once been. For so long the war had defined him, driven him. Now, with Taurus dead and the conflict ended, what was left? What had it all been for? He thought of the worlds left broken in their wake, the countless lives lost on both sides. He thought of Taurus, of the hatred that had driven the Cation, the mirror of Billy's own rage. In the end, had they been so different? Two warriors, two pawns in a game of galactic domination, fighting and dying for causes not their own. Billy stood alone in the observation deck, the weight of the ghosts heavy on his shoulders. The war was over, but the scars it left would linger forever. And as he gazed out into the infinite black, he couldn't help but wonder, was this truly victory, or just another turning in an endless cycle of violence and retribution? The questions haunted him as the stars slipped by, cold and uncaring, and in their pitiless light, Billy saw the reflection of a galaxy forever changed, a universe where peace was but a fleeting dream and the drums of war beat on, eternal and unending. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.